Nature is in the business of creating more and more unique patterns of life, which interact with each other geometrically, synergistically, to create yet more innovation, more originality, more unique patterns of life. A child is the synergy of two parents. And in the state of innocence, in the state of the child, it begins with sympathy, with acceptance. And the stage of the child is to accept and learn to survive within the cultural contract, which in an abuse culture is a contract of submission. Here are the terms that you must fit within in order to survive. And the child is held in that pattern with the law of mass. Now, the law of mass dictates that when a small energy encounters a larger energy, psychologically, physically, electrically, energetically, the larger system dominates the smaller system. A pinball colliding with a bowling ball has a known outcome. The pinball goes flying in the direction of the bounce, in the direction of inflection as it contacts the bowling ball. The bowling ball continues on its original trajectory. And so submission is the art of getting out of the way of that bowling ball that, if collided with, sends the identity into traumatic shock. Now, there is a doorway out of that system, out of that contract. And that doorway is guarded by giants. It is a door of compliance. It is also a door of authority and protection, of abuse, and domination. It is a mixed doorway. Every parent imposing the system of their operating system on the child is doing a mix of things, protecting the child, keeping the child alive, preparing the child for a world that uses that operating system. So it's a doorway. And in order to move towards adulthood, the child must enter the adolescent stage, which is the stage of the rebel, the state of rebellion, of antipathy, to reject the stultifying nature of the dogmatic elements of the system or the system entirely. Often the more bottled up and brittle a system is, the more it has to be thrown out entirely. But there's a state of adolescence. And in order to enter that state of rebellion, the child must go through the door of compliance. And guarding that door are the giants, known as grown-ups. They're bigger, they're stronger, more legal authority, more money, more competence. It is guarded by giants, by the institution, by the government, by the legal system, the education system, the parents, the older brothers, the neighborhood. It's guarded by giants. And the giants have a price that they do not willingly open the door. There are weights stacked up behind that door to stop the child going through. Now, initially, as a 2-year-old, not knowing that running out into the street could get them killed, that eating poisonous berries could kill them, this door is important as the child learns basic survival, intermixed with the less healthy aspects of the system. Now, a parent creates this door and locks it with a series of mechanisms. You can think of them as weights stacked behind the door. One of them is violence. If you begin to break the law, to violate the boundary of the system, and you are hit by a giant, you grasp that your physical life is in jeopardy if you don't stay in the box. So violence is one of those weights, because once you experience a consistent pattern of violence from a giant to you in a small body, you grasp at a biological level, your body rewires itself to say that to open the door is to risk death. So you get near the door and your body reacts. You know, when rats are studied in laboratories to try and make some sense of psychology in a crude and barbaric way, they will, for example, shock a rat every time they walk into this corner of the cage. And they will sound a bell just before the shock goes off. And as the rats become traumatized with this protocol of violence, as they get near that area of the cage and the bell goes off, they immediately recoil because they want to stay alive and avoid the traumatic shock. Now later, when the shock is removed and only the bell is played, the rats do not enter that domain. It has been walled off in their own biology. If thou shalt pass this bit of wire, thou shalt die, thou shalt suffer. So there's a wall of biological violence. And we see, elephants, for example, go through this training, whereas a baby elephant, a little rope is put around them that they cannot break and that causes their legs to go bloody as they fight against the constraint as an infant. That same string becomes associated with pain and suffering when pushed against. As a grown elephant, they will not break the string because they've developed a biological force field around that activity, where in their mind, no longer physical, no longer real, but in their mind, to step out of that cage is to court death. Sex is another form of influence. If you are lovers with an authority figure, if you are incestuously abused by a parent, sex deepens the impact. It sensitizes the psyche and the body and makes the fear of breaking the authority figure much greater, including the fear of loss, including with grown lovers. If someone is attached, which is the childlike state, in a state of need, through the intensity of lovemaking, the idea of separation becomes traumatic as it would be for a child. And so sex is one of the weights that adds to that force that holds the line. This can be in a romantic relationship. This can be an abuse relationship. A kidnapper who repeatedly rapes someone will have a stronger biological field. Do not go against that person. And it feels more intense because sex is an amplifier of charge, of intensity. Humiliation, which is a form of shame, which is a form of trauma, is another line. If I say this thing, I will be laughed at. I will be laughed at, meaning my loneliness will be dissociated from. I will be rejected, and people will laugh at me as if I am not one of them. And again, to the child, to be disowned, to be humiliated, is to be unsure of one's survival. So this will be a form of trauma, to be excluded from the group upon which one depends. separate from humiliation, exclusion. You're not welcome here. You can't come in here. We don't want you at the dinner table. You've crossed the line. Go to your room. You are unwelcome in this family. And the biology of the child understands that if this goes on indefinitely, my survival, my security, my love and belonging, my self-esteem, my four lowest in the hierarchy of human needs are cut off. Exclusion, the fear of exclusion, is one of those weights enforcing the line. Intensity. When a child pours 1 inch more milk than the parent said, pour half a cup, and the child pours 2/3 of a cup of milk, and the parent flies into a rage. There's no violence. The visceral reaction. How could you? The sounds. It's a form of intimidation. It communicates to a smaller body. I have a power of rage, of hate, of anger, of defense of this boundary that you cannot face. A 6-year-old cannot stand in front of the rage of a parent without looking down, without shame. Unless they are so traumatized they enter their reptilian brain in a sociopathic state. And this is one way that sociopaths are programmed, are trained, where there's no escape from the overwhelming dominance of the abusive parent, and unable to escape physically. One escapes into the reptilian brain where all empathy is cut off. Because what is flooding the child is intensity through empathic channels. It is through empathic channels that a child grasps, my parents are upset. I cannot survive without their cooperation. My life is in jeopardy because they are enraged, and I get it. What do I have to do so that you won't be directing this intensity? Well, it's very easy. The parent says, get back in line. Don't cross this line. Now, these lines can be incredibly well informed and beneficial. They can be arbitrary. They can be power trips. That's irrelevant. The larger person imposes a line, which, for better or for worse, the child experiences trauma to cross. You have then trauma itself. Experiences. Maybe the parent doesn't stop. They go out on the road, a car hits them, knocks them over, and almost kills them. They grasp, I can't go across that line. I've got to come back in line. So traumatic experiences in the environment that reinforce the lines. And you finally have the weight of survival. A 12-year-old can consider running away from home and finding a carrot, or, has learned how to steal food, etc., if they need to survive, and so is not as traumatized as a 4-year-old who literally, but at a biological level, it's not rational yet. It's not thoughtful. It's biological. The body of a 4-year-old communicates to the brain, don't cross the line where the giants will refuse sanction, will refuse the food and heat and money necessary to maintain existence. This is the wall. This is the doorway. These are the weights that have to be moved aside in order for the child to move into the next stage of development, which is antipathy and rebellion. They have to face the boundary. Now, there's a couple of ways people can do this. Some parental and family structures, some cult communities, some military are just too big to rebel against and win, even when they're 6 feet tall, even when they have some. the framework is too tight. In this situation, the child must run. It is a rebellion through the reptilian brain of flight. I have to escape the system that's suffocating me, the system that is imprisoning me, that is stopping my own unique expression. I have to run from it because I'm not big enough to confront it. I have to run. So you can escape and rebel. You can become an adolescent through running away from home, through moving out of the house if one has the wherewithal to build, to achieve that, in some more formal way other than just stealing a car and driving away or staying at friends or, refusing contact. The other, in healthier families where there's less abuse and there's more space for voice with dignity, the rebellion takes place. In Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights, he talks about his father's ritual of creating adults, or at least adolescents, where he would bully the children until such point as the children fought the father, knocked him out cold, and that was the initiation into adolescence, to the rebellion. You made it through. You fought the bullying father, you knocked him down, and you won. This can happen in arguments. This can happen in physical fights. You wouldn't be intimidated anymore by the boundary. You punched the asshole in the face, and you won. So this is another transition into adolescence. Now, in the case of Matthew McConaughey and his brothers, the father, waking up from being knocked out, hugged and embraced his boy, and then treated him like a man from that point because he stood up to authority as one of the ancient tribal rituals of becoming an adult by facing death. The initiation into manhood, to face death, to face that solid block of bricks, that rope that has threatened extinction to life until that point, to face it and win. And in the tribal rituals where the boy does battle with the older men, when the child is being initiated into adulthood, the adults let the boy win so that he can experience the liberation of being free of the prison. And in healthy cultures, a person is not trusted, is not an adult, until they have broken the captivity of that fear of death built into their body by fighting it, by confronting the dragon, the reptilian brain, that will otherwise control your life until you die. Fear of the inner dragon, fear of your own biology. You get close to doing something you want to do and you feel afraid. You feel like you're going to die because you know instinctively you're breaking the boundary that was set for you, that is imprisoning you. And you're too scared to shove open the door. So you turn away from your dreams. You go back into the grief, the depression, the resentment, the self-pity of the child that is unable to grow out of its prison because the prison was too meticulously constructed, too much shame, too much hate, too little love, too much abuse, too little protection. And the child learned, I'm never going to get out of there. I want to die. Suicide is another initiation. I'm getting the fuck out of here. I can't get through the wall. Not that way. But I can get out. I can run from this planet, from this body, from this lifetime, from this family. I can escape. So you have suicide, you have running away, you have confronting and beating, you also have the process of alliance, where you get help through a therapist, through a good friend. There's a wonderful scene in the Tolkien movie about his young life where these 4 young men form a bond. And it's the bond and the support of fellowship that allows them to stand up to the abusive father and say, no, I respect you, Father, but no, this is my way. You have another breakthrough when the initiation is honored. In this case, the father says, okay, I respect your values. I will back down. And you have prevailed. You are now an adult. A child cannot create anything new. Life has failed when a human being stays trapped in the childlike cage of submission, of pleasing the authority figure, who often, in addition to this, you have insanity. That's one of the walls there. This is for your own good. May be true at age 2, may be true at age 4. But when a parent clings to the childlike state of their offspring, this is for your own good. Don't push me. If you marry the person you want to marry, I'll never speak to you again. It's for your own good. When this clinging is too tight, you're left with resentment, addiction, self-pity, depression, and the collapse of a life before it blossomed through the rebellion of adolescence. Now, once adolescence has expressed itself, you've run away from home, you've fought the dragon, you've rebutted the argument and stood up for yourself. Once the child has rebelled effectively, they're now outside the pattern. They're in chaos. We need an operating system. We need a structure. We need a language. We need a protocol if we're not just to spin our tail going around unconsciously and aimlessly because we don't have a map. And this stage of chaos and rebellion, the destruction of the old system, is in a healthy culture, in a healthy continuing maturation process, moves into adult. Now, the adult is taking the stage among the giants. You are now big. You are now equal. You're not the only one, but you're also not a pinball that's going to be bounced aside automatically. You have weight in the dialogue. And now is a time of synthesis. The adult is the witness that looks down from an objective point of view, not the point of view of the pleaser, not the point of view of sheer terror and trauma and shame, and not the point of view of the adolescent that rejects everything in all systems. The government's fucked up, my parent. The adult looks down from the witness. And the adult says, you know, brushing your teeth before bed, I like that too. I'm going to do that one. Saying thank you when someone gives you a gift seems to work. I like it. When people do that to me, I'm going to keep that one. Always suppressing my feelings because it makes my father feel shame. I'm not doing that. He has to deal with his own fucking shame. I'm expressing my feelings. This is my life. So life has succeeded in creating a synergy, a form that is greater than the sum of the parts. Because when what the child says yes to is the best and the worst of both parents, What they reject is the best and the worst of both parents in adolescent. And what they have as a palette to synthesize as an adult is the best of both, and what they have to reject is the worst of both. There's more awareness. You realize the dysfunctions of your father and you realize the dysfunctions of your mother are different. So you've got two dysfunctions to reject. They only had one. You're rejecting both of them and the dysfunctions of the entire family line. And you're adopting the gifts of both family lines, which are synergized and synthesized in the grown-up or perhaps the adult. Because many parents have not exited the child. They're in their prison. They become grown-up giants, and they impose their prison without modification, without consciousness on the next generation. And there is no new life. There's no synergy. There's no change. There's simply a viral dissemination of an evolutionary pattern of cult thought frozen in dogma without awareness. You've got death or stagnation. Another generation, but no change, no evolution. And where are we evolving to? What's life's game? It's to move from simplicity, unconsciousness, unnecessary suffering, dissociation, disintegration, and fragmentation towards intelligence, towards spending less and less energy to create more and more sustainable grace, more and more sustainable well-being, more and more complex, conscious, inclusive patterns than the ones before. And thus life succeeds. A generation is not wasted. A child has moved through initiation into adulthood and is now a completely unique form of energy that did not exist before and does not exist anywhere else. Now, why is this good for life? Well, life is in the game of winning. How can you be sure that you will win every lottery? It's quite simple. You create billions upon billions of number sequences. You see, when there's only 10 unique forms of human being on the planet, nature may have got it wrong. They're each unique, they're each different, but they may not be the right configuration, the right pattern to survive and thrive in that environment, and then they may die. But if there are billions upon billions of unique conscious beings in the human species, one of them is bound to get it right. It's like dice. If you're trying to get a 6 and you're playing with one die, you roll it, you've got a 1 in 6 chance. If you turn that one die into 100 die and roll them, one of them is guaranteed to be a 6. And it only takes one. Life is in the business of winning. And winning requires evolutionary modification, anomalies. Nature loves diversity. Nature loves uniqueness because it increases the statistical odds of success. We cannot be available for nature's winning game unless we become a unique, intelligently synthesized adult, rejecting everything toxic and dysfunctional in our past and in our lineage and in our cult, and embracing everything beneficial in our lineage, in our cult, and taking it to the next level.